Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our fourth webinar of the Post-Concussion Community Learning Series. This webinar will be called The Gut Instincts about PCS. And while we wait for everyone to join, if you want to just drop in the chat where you're joining from. We've got Squamish, BC, Montreal. I'm in New Brunswick, and I believe Ashley is in Ontario. We've got Winnipeg, so North Carolina. So it looks like participants have slowed down, so we will get started. So my name is Taya Tulip, and I'm the Director of Patient and Caregiver Services at Concussion Legacy Foundation Canada. And today we are facilitating a webinar about the gut and PCS. Before we get started, I'll take a moment to introduce Concussion Legacy Foundation Canada, or CLFC. So we were founded in 2012 to advance the study, treatment, and prevention of the effects of brain trauma and associated mental health implications in Canadian athletes, military personnel, youth, and other at-risk groups. We're proud to have served thousands of Canadians in person and millions online. And our goal today is to help develop a clear understanding of nutrition and PCS. And to support that, we're joined by registered dietitian Ashley Armstrong. So Ashley is a registered dietitian and a certified specialist in sports dietetics who has spent the past 13 years working with elite performers ranging from Olympic and Paralympic athletes to special forces, tactical operators, and players in the PWHL. Her interest in concussion recovery and subconcussive brain protection took root during her years with Rugby Canada's Sevens program, where she saw real potential for nutrition to play a bigger role in brain health. And this led to her research on omega-3 supplementation and subconcussion risks and to education work with the Special Forces. This fall, she's beginning her PhD at the University of Guelph, where she will study the long-term impact of omega-3 supplementation on brain health and athlete resilience across university sports in men and women. Today, she's here to talk about the gut-brain axis and changes that occur post-concussion and strategies for acute and chronic management after concussion. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, be sure to drop them in the Q&A box so we can address them. And following her presentation and the Q&A, we will share some additional free resources offered by CLFC to help you navigate your recovery. Before we get started, I do want to note that this session is for educational purposes only and isn't intended as personal medical advice. And if you have questions specific to your situation, please reach out to our helpline, which we will share later in the presentation. So Ashley, welcome, and if you want to get started.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I just need to share my screen, and this always takes me a little bit of time because I haven't used Zoom in a while, so bear with me. Okay, sorry about this. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So we're going to talk about the gut today and how it is linked with the brain, and also where post-concussion syndrome is going to have an impact with your gut health. So Taya gave a great background about me. I just want to kind of let you know I've been a practitioner. I've been a dietitian since 2010, and I've worked in high performance sport since 2013. So I'm a practitioner at heart. I work directly with athletes and military personnel to look at small changes that they can make in their nutrition to improve their overall health. And a lot of what I've directed my practice in is around concussion and also cognitive support and cognitive health and performance. Okay. So today we're gonna start with going over the gut-brain axis and also kind of the gut microbiome-brain axis as what we see is kind of linked to nowadays. And then talk about any changes to the gut post-injury, so post-concussion. And then I really want to focus on what nutrition interventions can be used to support both from overall gut and brain health, so more of like chronic approaches, so day-to-day consistent eating that can really support your gut and brain health. And then really gut management post-injury when you're dealing with some severe symptoms that are often gut related and affecting your nutrition and what you can do with your nutrition. Okay. So this gut-brain axis is really this two-way communication and connection between your gut and your brain. And they're connected through the largest nerve of your body, or the vagus nerve, and that communication happens through the nerve connections. So there are additional pathways that are involved in this axis, and that's really around chemical messengers, the endocrine system, which is kind of what's creating and releasing hormones throughout your body, gut hormones that are being released, and also neurotransmitters. And there are a lot of different things that can impact this communication and have also this direct impact on your gut microbiome, which we're going to go into a lot more detail around. And these are a lot of lifestyle focused impacts, so the environment that you're living in, your dietary practices, your overall lifestyle, so whether you're active or less active, any antibiotic use, and then of course at the root of everything is age and genetics. And so it's really important to know that this continuous communication is regulating your digestion, your immune response, and also your mood. So we do see impacts on your cognitive functioning and potential psychiatric concerns, so from risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, and also depression and anxiety. So where does the microbiome come in? This seems to be at the forefront of this gut-brain axis, and it really is shaping your neurocognitive processes. So this is a diverse environment in your gut that is essential for various bodily functions, and it's unique to every individual. And again, as I mentioned, it's like formed by diet, by your genetics. It can change with age and also the environment that you are living in. So it has impacts on your blood-brain barrier, so what's getting across, what key nutrients are getting across that blood-brain barrier. Myelination, so this is linked to neuroplasticity in your brain, and so this is your brain's capacity to modify its structure and function in response to different experiences, new learnings, memory, but also injury and environmental changes. So it's microbiome is linked with neurogenesis, or the making of new cells, and microglial maturation. So this is kind of your main immune cells in your brain that help clear inflammation, and they help resolve inflammation post-injury, after kind of that initial inflammation that's helping heal the brain. It's really helping prevent chronic inflammation happening. And the microbiome is, again, linked to neurological behaviors and cognition. So things like depression, anxiety, but also alertness, attention, and the elimination of things like brain fog. So then we get into kind of an injury. So when a brain injury is happening, and how is that impacting the gut-brain axis or the gut microbiome brain axis? So not a whole lot is known in this area, But traditionally, really what we want in your gut microbiome is a symbiosis. So all of those gut bugs, that diversity of those bugs in your gut really working together to mitigate or to kind of manage inflammation, neuroinflammation, and improve your immune system. But what we can see is post-injury there is the risk of dysbiosis. So kind of these microbes are not working well together. And often also even having dysbiosis prior to an injury can even make that recovery post-concussion worse. So we talked about kind of those environmental factors that can really impact your gut microbiome. So if those factors are, we're looking at your dietary factors, lifestyle, environmental, genetics, and that's creating kind of a dysbiosis in that microbiome. Even before that brain injury, it can make that recovery post-injury even worse than if you're going in with some sort of symbiosis before that injury. And so what we often see is with that dysbiosis is a lot of inflammation. So chronic inflammation there, we're seeing things like oxidative stress, which is leading to even more inflammation, and then behavior and cognitive impairments. So we talked about that risk of anxiety, depression, those are going to be amplified. Things like those symptoms of brain fog or alertness, attention. And then also what we see is your intestinal permeability is going to be worse. So the risk of a leaky gut, where what we're seeing are potential toxins from the gut being released from that intestinal lining and going into your bloodstream and having risks of disease. So that's kind of what's happening inside your body, and often what you are feeling post-injury are often immediate nausea, so vomiting, appetite changes, and then bowel habit changes. And this can be extreme from constipation all the way to full loose stools. So that's often what a post-concussed individual is feeling, and that's all that disruption that's happening and that dysbiosis in your microbiome. So I mentioned there's not really a ton of literature out there that is looking at kind of that microbiome, but there's some promising research that has been done. So this is a study from 2022. It's a small group of individuals, but this was done in NCAA Division I football players, and the sample size was about 33, and 4 of those individuals had major concussions, and the rest were having subconcussion injuries. And so that's kind of my bread and butter with athletes are subconcussion injuries. So those consistent knocks to your head that you see in contact sports or combat sports or military situations, which are not necessarily being diagnosed as a concussion right there, but the accumulation is having pretty big impacts to the longevity of that athlete, to their performance, and to their overall health. So what they did here in this study is they were collecting stools, blood, and saliva samples at 3 time points throughout the season. And really significantly what they saw with those 4 concussed people is a real steep decline in kind of good bacteria in their gut. And they were looking at some key biomes or key bacteria, but they really saw a steep decrease of those good bacteria in the gut. And then in those subconcussed individuals, so there was a correlation in traumatic brain injury linked blood proteins. So often in the blood there are some proteins that are used for diagnosis. So those blood proteins and the actual bacteria in the stool. So there was a measurable link to those changes in good bacteria in those subconcussed individuals. So not diagnosed with a concussion, but still getting multiple knocks to the head. And so this study really opened up a potential opportunity for diagnosis criteria using the body's microbiome. So could we actually look at microbiome and look at diagnosis criteria, or even returning to play for an athlete or returning to learn. So going back to work or going back to school for individuals post-injury. So let's look into nutrition. So where is nutrition going to play to really help with that gut-brain axis, to promote that gut microbiome, and especially when we're looking at post-injury? So we're going to focus on consistent dietary, almost like gut protection interventions that you can look at to really ensure that symbiosis of your microbiome. And then I'm going to finish with some acute strategies, more tangible strategies that you can use post-concussion to ensure that you are still fueling your brain, fueling your gut, and managing those initial symptoms that we see right after injury. So this is something this is a military style that I really like to use, that I've adopted from almost 8 years working in special forces, is really to present the bottom line up front. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail into each of these things. And what is really important to know in evidence-based nutrition is it's not going to come out as crazy and sexy. So often nutrition recommendations, whether it's for brain health or for cardiovascular health, are very simple. And I often use the term or the phrase, nutrition is common sense, but not common practice. So everything is pretty common sense, but it can be really hard to implement, especially in an injured individual. So plants, eating more plants is really foundational. Adding a pre and probiotic rich foods. So I'm going to focus on food-based interventions, not so much supplementation, but I'm also happy to have, if there are questions about that, to answer some questions. And hydration, very simple, basic nutrition recommendations. So when we look at, your gut is what you're eating, and where dietary interventions are supportive or unsupportive of your gut. So there's been some good research that's looked at a lot of different dietary strategies and their impact on your gut microbiome. It is really hard to do long-term research in nutrition. To have someone, say, on a carnivore diet for decades is a pretty hard thing to be able to manage. But so a lot of this is more short-term interventions, and then looking at that gut microbiome, often from stool samples. They seem to be the best quality sample to really get a sense of what's in your gut microbiome compared to salivary samples or your saliva. So gold standard, hands down, is a Mediterranean diet. And so what we see is it's increasing your diversity in your microbiome, reducing inflammation, improving that intestinal barrier so you're not having risks of a leaky gut. And then we have this short chain fatty acid production. So these are main metabolites of your gut microbiome that is produced by fermentation of fiber, of dietary fiber. And they really play a vital role to actually provide fuel for your colon, and also to really help regulate processes of immune function and of inflammation, so managing that inflammation. And those short chain fatty acids are highly linked, and what's being produced in your microbiome to gastrointestinal and neurological disorders. So things like IBS, or risk of IBS or high symptoms of IBS, and also things like depression and anxiety. So fiber-rich diets as well are going to be anti-inflammatory, help protect that intestinal layer, and also producing those short-chain fatty acids. And then, of course, a plant-based diet. And I'm not recommending a vegan diet or going completely off any animal foods, but just increasing the plants in your diet is really what this is looking like. And so in this study, they did look at specifically a vegan diet along with that fiber and Mediterranean diet, but I'm not expecting anyone to start going vegan if they've never done that before. So when we're looking at kind of that microbiome landscapes that pretty is very barren, a Western diet is quite common to seem like to have the worst outcomes for your microbiome. So a lack of diversity, a lack of richness, chronic inflammation. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of things like highly refined sugars that are consumed in large quantities, saturated fats, trans fats, very pro-inflammatory. And then they're having a high risk of metabolic disease. So risks of things like risks of diabetes or cardiovascular health. Long-term high protein, and this would be more like a carnivore diet, really restricts the diversity of your microbiome. And then a ketogenic diet as well for a long period of time can have impacts on the diversity of your microbiome and reducing that. Now, I will just make a quick note about a ketogenic diet because some people might have heard that this might be a beneficial diet post-injury. And there is some potential research that's kind of been extrapolated from more pediatric research in epilepsy, where a ketogenic diet can be beneficial for managing symptoms. In a concussion, post-concussion incidents, it's more rodent-based data, and there's really very little human research. And from kind of, I put my practitioner hat back on, following a ketogenic diet post-injury is really challenging. Just having someone eat post-injury can be a really challenging thing to support. And so then trying to do a very restrictive high-fat diet is going to be even more challenging. So just being aware of kind of there is potential, but not a lot of good human research around a ketogenic diet post-injury. Okay. So I'm not too sure how many have heard of the MIND diet. So this is the Mediterranean DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay. So this is often used as an approach in aging brains, especially those at risk of Alzheimer's or dementia. And so there's not a ton of research in use of it in a post-concussion brain, but what we see a lot of nutrients that are being used in the MIND diet, specifically things like omega-3s and high-rich polyphenols, which are plant-based compounds that are really linked to managing inflammation. So there's been, more specific individual research done on those key nutrients within this diet. This overall diet, though, really encompasses a Mediterranean diet, which from the previous slide is, gold standard. So we're looking at higher levels of plants from leafy greens, and then reductions in things that are going to be more pro-inflammatory, seen in more of a Western diet. So reduction in consumption of red meat, looking at more of a poultry and fish, reduction in fried foods and refined sugars. And so, this again has been used in Alzheimer's, dementia research, and in the aging brain. So there is a potential benefit to following this diet when we're looking at preserving that gut-brain axis. So when I speak to clients and I talk about improving both their gut health and their brain health from a consistent chronic nutrition approach throughout their life, I really like the approach of adding foods instead of restricting foods. So I always start where someone is, and I look at how can we take steps to add some really rich nutrients to help manage inflammation, improve your gut biodiversity. That's going to, again, improve that gut-brain axis connection. So this 30 plus plants per week approach, so this is rooted in this, what was the American Gut Project. That was a crowdsourced kind of citizen science initiative that was launched in 2012 in California. And its really core was to map the human microbiome diversity against things like lifestyle, health status, dietary choices. And they were looking at, tens of thousands of individuals that participated in this. And the main landmark analysis from this study was that individuals who were consuming over 30 different types of plants a week had significant greater gut microbiome diversity than those who were consuming 10 or less per week. So this approach, it looks at, okay, we're trying to aim for 30 plants per week, and that's including a variety of vegetables, that's like from starchy vegetables to leafy greens, nuts and seeds, whole grains are also included, as well as fruits and fresh herbs. So it's not just focused on fruits and vegetables, we're looking at all things that are growing from the ground. And with someone who is maybe only eating five plants a week, all I'm asking for them to do is let's try to add an additional plant every single week and try to just get more and more each week. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. So it doesn't have to be fresh and whole. It could be canned. It could be frozen options as well. How is that going to work within your budget and your current diet, your current preferences as well? So I've worked with individuals and athletes who only eat 2 vegetables. They hate all other vegetables, and so we're just trying to promote those vegetables and then add some extra plants in other ways. So maybe we're adding some extra nuts and seeds, we're focusing on some more whole grains, or we're increasing fruit consumption as well. Okay. So from a pre and probiotic perspective, so I think we hear a lot about probiotics, or at least we have in the last decade, but I'm actually hearing more about prebiotics these days. So prebiotics are essentially the food for your good gut bacteria. And if you're not providing that bacteria a fuel source, they're not going to thrive. So it's often fiber-rich plants, to be honest. And I've given you some pictures there that are probably richest in prebiotics. So you'll see some beans, bananas are really rich, oats, and even cocoa, and high quality cocoa. And so you're looking at that food for that healthy gut bacteria. And then the probiotics, they're those live microorganisms that are providing those health benefits to your microbiome. And, it's really important for digestive health and for your immune function. But what we're seeing is that if you're not feeding those good bacteria, those good bacteria again are not going to thrive. So fiber is foundational. So together, these are really helping regulate and manage that gut microbiome and that composition of that gut microbiome. So trying to ensure it's as symbiotic as possible, as diverse as possible. It's also promoting immune function and managing inflammation. And then potentially supportive post-injury. So with that football study that I spoke of previously, so they were looking at, okay, can we use that some key bacteria in stool samples to look at maybe a diagnosis post-concussion, and maybe we could use probiotics as a therapeutic intervention to support that initial post-injury gut dysbiosis. So I think there's a lot of potential in that. I really focus on increasing people's food sources of probiotics instead of just looking at a supplement right off the bat, because there's a lot of promise within this area, but the research is not quite there yet. So we don't know the optimal strain. There are so many different strains of probiotics. We don't know the dose that needs to be provided to really support the gut post-injury as a probiotic supplement, as well as the timing of that administration and how long it should be administered post-injury. So what I really recommend for individuals is trying to day in and day out include prebiotic-rich foods. That's going to happen naturally just by increasing your plant intake, and also include probiotic-rich foods. And you're seeing richer amounts of probiotics in things like kefir and yogurt as well, compared to if you're, drinking kombucha or you're doing some sauerkraut. You're going to get a little bit more bang for your buck in, say, adding some kefir to a smoothie, and some yogurt, whether it's Greek or regular yogurt. Even naturally flavored yogurt is still going to have a wide variety of probiotics in it too. And then I'm going to speak to hydration. So as simple as this sounds, I think my time working with athletes, I talk about hydration all the time, and I see dehydration chronically from morning to night, and it's having impacts, especially my time with military, on cognitive functioning and decision making and learning, and also just overall gut health. So we know hydration is really supporting your digestion by breaking down food and facilitating the nutrient absorption into your cells. It's helping maintain a healthy mucosal layer so that intestinal integrity is really promoted by optimal hydration. And it's helping, provide that extra barrier to prevent harmful substances from entering the bloodstream, that leaky gut that I mentioned earlier. And then optimal hydration is really beneficial for a balanced gut microbiome. So dehydration can really affect digestive issues. So from bloating to constipation to, again, a breakdown or compromise of that gut barrier, and increasing that intestinal permeability. And then what we also see are cognitive impairments. So there's some research that even 1 to 2% weight or dehydration rate, and we look at this in kind of weight changes day in and day out, that can be in a 185-pound individual, that might just be a loss of 1 pound that we're seeing day in and day out. In an athletic population, we are also monitoring hydration status in them, so we are looking at weight changes to make sure that they are not in a severely dehydrated state. So 1 to 2% is not a lot of loss, and that is leading to a dehydrated state, and it's affecting vision and motor tracking, short-term memory, and attention as well. It also is actually increasing the severity of post-concussion symptoms in that kind of dehydrated, very mild dehydrated state. So, really seeing both a digestive impact, but also a cognitive impact. So hydration needs are foundational. So if we're looking, I do very specific hydration needs for the individual, because everyone is different shapes and sizes of their body. So a range of 30 to 35 mils per kilogram of body weight. So if you know your weight in pounds, you can divide that by 2.2 to give it a weight in kilos, and then multiply that by 30 to 35. And that's giving you an idea of your fluid needs throughout the day. And that's not just water. I'm not just talking about water. I am talking about hydrating fluids. So water, definitely foundational, but things like milk, 100% fruit juice, it could be sparkling water, coffee and tea do fit into that hydration recommendation, up to about 4 cups of coffee per day. Above that is going to have more of a diuretic effect, but 4 cups is still going to be counting into that fluid requirement. But also soups and broth-based stews, smoothies or meal replacement drinks or protein drinks, those are also going to be counted into your day-to-day hydration to hit that target. What's really important, if you know you're not drinking enough, and most people I see in my office, they are not, slowly start to increase your fluid. Because if you just, oh my gosh, I'm only taking this much in and I need to be doubling that, you're going to probably pee quite consistently. Your kidneys are not going to adapt to that fluid increase. So make sure you're slowly increasing fluids, and consider adding more fluids to when you're eating, and you'll retain a little bit more fluid, which is going to help prevent you from peeing as consistently. The other thing, because I've talked about adding more plants, so we're adding more fiber into your diet, you then also need to be considering to help digest that fiber, you need to add more fluids into your diet. So typically adding, about a cup or 250 mils for every additional 5 grams of fiber that you're adding in is going to be really important. So, to kind of put that into context, because I don't expect you to look at grams of fiber, but if you're starting with maybe only eating 5 plants a week and you're going to try to double that within a couple weeks, you really want to be conscious of probably getting an extra cup of fluid for every extra plant that you are going to be consuming in that week. So I wanted to put a couple resources here that are really reliable and evidence-based from a really reliable source. So the Canadian Digestive Health Foundation. So they have a focused one kind of on the mind and the gut, or the brain-gut axis, from what it is, talking about the vagus nerve, the gut microbiome, to kind of some dietary approaches. And then they also have a hydration link here. So they're really good resources out there. I think there's so much information that it can often get overwhelming. So I wanted to help direct you to some really decent resources that are Canadian focused and are evidence-based. So the final thing I'm going to speak to are acute nutrition interventions that you can look at post-concussion. So because of that dysbiosis in the gut microbiome that we see post-injury, and the symptoms that you're having are often nausea, vomiting, appetite changes, bowel habit changes, that's one of the first things I really address with athletes or military who have been concussed. I look at, okay, what's happening with your bowels? How's your appetite? Do you have any nausea or vomiting? There's no point in, increasing their probiotic intake or giving them an omega-3 supplement if they're highly nauseous or they have no appetite. So we start with that. So really the first thing is I highly recommend not skipping meals. So trying to ensure that you are eating regularly, and usually post-concussion, that can be every 2 to 3 hours, having something small. And then targeting hydration as best as you can to ensure that you are well hydrated. You're going to feel increases in nausea if you are dehydrated, so ensuring you're getting hydrating fluids. And those hydrating fluids can also help by providing energy, providing protein, providing a carbohydrate source and an overall nutrient source. So if your appetite is low, eating small frequent snacks instead of large consistent meals is a lot more palatable. Choosing energy dense foods that you enjoy and are tolerated and are easy, and then having those available on hand, so they're in the cupboard, they're in the fridge. Liquid meals and snacks can be really beneficial in this situation as well. So Boost and Ensure are a great option to have. They've got a full nutrient profile. Their flavor profile is much better than it used to be when I was working clinical, 13, 14 years ago. And online, they do have lots of discount codes that you can get, or you can talk to your medical professional or nurse practitioner to potentially look to get some of those to support your nutrition when you're not able to eat post-injury. For any nausea, small frequent meals are often really helpful. Avoiding foods with strong smells. So things like, if you hate the smell of eggs, probably not, even though a great protein source and very easy to make, probably not going to be helpful for your nausea. Often simpler carbohydrates, things like toast or crackers, are a little bit easier to tolerate than foods that are higher in protein and fat during a period of nausea. And then as those symptoms would subside, you're slowly reintroducing some of those other foods, so some other protein-rich foods. So even if you're starting with just dry toast, and then you might add some cheese with that when your nausea is subsiding. can be just fine. And again, liquid options that are calorie dense, so small sips of those can help with your nausea. Ensuring that you're not going on an empty stomach, because that also is going to exacerbate your nauseous feelings. And then one of the big things that I encourage individuals is to find support to help with your meals or snacks and your groceries. So whether that's leaning on family or friends, whether that's doing deliveries for groceries to your house, having someone drop off some of those meal replacement drinks to your house. Those are things that you want to be conscious of, because if you don't have that, sometimes that support, you may not have those options available, so that you are eating consistently and getting some nutrients into your body and your brain. Okay, so that's it for me. Thank you so much for your attention. I put 2 of my emails on. I just wanted to mention, so I am starting my PhD in Guelph, and we are also going to be looking at stool samples with our athletes. It's some exciting research in the area, and so keep your ears peeled over the next few years. Thank you again for having me and for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Ashley. That was pretty informative, and even like as much as I know about the brain, I'm still learning a lot about what goes on. So we do have some time to take a few questions if you want to drop them in the Q&A. I know I have personally a few questions I'd like to ask and pick your brain about, but just a quick reminder that this webinar again is for educational purposes only. No personal medical advice will be given or provided. So we won't be posting those types of questions. Um, to Ashley, if you're looking for individual guidance, you can reach out to our helpline, and we'll share that link shortly in the chat. But Ashley, can I ask you a first question that was kind of been on my mind for the past little bit as I go through the grocery store? Um, when it comes to probiotics in terms of like supplements and like the pills, I guess, of like probiotics, one thing that's often brought up is the shelf life, or like the ones that you can pick up just in like the dry shelf versus ones that are refrigerated. And considering how much probiotics play an important role with this, supplementation might be an easier way to consume them. Is there a difference between like the dry shelf one, or like the room temperature one, or one that's in one of those fancy fridges that you might see?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think there's so many. So first off, supplements are a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I deal with them on a day-to-day basis when working with athletes, and I am very skeptical of them most of the time. So I think what you want to be first considering is the what's on the label, the duration, or the quantity that's on the label of those microbes that you'll see, and then also the type of bacteria that's in them. So they're all different mixes. And you know what? There's a really great probiotic website, and I just thought of this now. I don't want to waste anyone's time, but I will send that to you. That really helps you look at high quality probiotics and help you choose one. And also it helps look at, okay, if I have, say, traveler's diarrhea, this is probably a better probiotic for me to choose than this one. So there's a lot of quantity. The biggest thing, what I would also look at, is make sure your supplement has an NPM number. So that's a natural product number. So they are Health Canada recommended. So they've gone through more scrutiny. And you won't find those. So if you're going to the US, there's going to be like 10 times the amount that we see in Canada. And that's always concerning. So with a dry supplement, what you are looking at is more of the products or the microbes DNA, and it's still active. I would still use the expiry date for that product to make sure that you're not extending that product, but the DNA of that is still active. If you are sitting that out in the blazing heat of July or August, you are denaturing that DNA, and it's not going to be as efficient. But to be honest, what I recommend athletes are pill-based supplements over the liquid because of the cost perspective. And one of my favorites is Thorne is a really good company, and they make a great probiotic as well. I use it because they're also third-party tested for athletes. So I actually lean more towards the pills than I do the liquid because of that cost generation, and that you're getting a lot more units. So you're getting, billions of units compared to that liquid. Yeah. Hopefully
It's
that
all,
kind of answered the question. It's supplements
nope.
are a mess.
Yeah, I know. And that's kind of what I was digging at was just like the kind of the broad industry as a whole. It's super difficult for
Yeah.
someone who's not coming in and like is just like very unaware of what to choose, and then you're faced with like seemingly 100 choices in front of you. But no, that's some great recommendations. And yeah,
Yeah,
important
I'll
to
send that website through as well, and you can send
absolutely.
it through to everyone because it's a great resource. I just didn't even think about it. So,
Hey, that's what I'm here for.
yeah.
But yeah, and important to bring up like the cost associated, right? Because
Yeah.
those like kind of goes without saying that stuff can really drive up in cost. But
Yeah.
um
Can I just say one more
yeah,
thing?
yeah,
Just
yeah.
if you are like looking at a probiotic supplement, I also want you to be really considering your prebiotic intake.
Mhm.
So, what is your fiber intake currently? Because that seems to be like really the most foundational piece for your gut microbiome.
100%. Okay, so there was a question from the chat. I think it might be an easy one. Is regular aged cheese considered probiotic?
Great question. So compared, it's compared to like yogurt and kefir and even things like kimchi or sauerkraut, the diversity of probiotics and bacterial species is not as diverse as those products in aged cheese. This will be different depending on where you are in the world. So if you are in a Scandinavian country, some of those aged cheeses may have more beneficial bacteria than a North American aged cheese. I haven't actually done a full comparison of different aged cheeses from different countries. I'm happy to dig into that a little bit more and give more of a comparison for that aged cheese. So just I would really look if you're trying to get the bang for your buck is kefir is yogurt, especially like you don't need to get Activia, like they have so much great advertisements with Activia, but any yogurt, Greek yogurt, Scandinavian yogurt, regular yogurt, no name yogurt is going to still be really rich in those probiotics.
Cool. So another one that came up was kind of talking about different types of diet because you mentioned ketogenic, you mentioned the Mediterranean. But this one mentions that or asks that can you speak to the overall effect on intermittent fasting when it comes to post-concussion syndrome?
Yeah, great question. There's not a lot of research around it, similar to the ketogenic diet, and I would put someone on a ketogenic diet before I would ask them to intermittent fast. Honestly, I deter people away from intermittent fasting because you are, for one, you're not providing your brain with a source of fuel, and you're not getting the benefits that a potential ketogenic diet would have, which is providing an alternative source of fuel for your brain. So your brain typically relies on glucose as its main fuel source, and for a really well followed ketogenic diet, which, as I said before, practically can be very, very challenging, and I would highly recommend you work with a dietitian to follow a diet like that post-concussion, but it's providing you with ketones, which are an alternate source of fuel. When you're doing intermittent fasting, you are limiting your glucose for your brain, and you're also not in a ketogenic state, so you're not even producing an optimal amount of ketones. So I would highly recommend against intermittent fasting post-concussion.
Cool. And actually, there's been a couple questions here, and you'll be able to speak on this pretty well, and maybe in 4 years, even more. But when it comes to omega-3 supplementation, some neurologists have suggested omega-3s. Is there, for like migraine management or post-concussion management, is there kind of a amount, or is it kind of like, I guess,
Mhm.
a number associated with how much omega-3s is too much, or like what's your opinion when it comes to that?
Yeah, so I immediately post-concussion, there's been some case study-based research that's looked at very high levels of omega-3 supplementation that's administered by a medical doctor. So we're talking kind of 9,000 milligrams of total omega-3s to 15,000 milligrams of total omega-3s, and that's after a pretty traumatic brain injury from, say, a motor vehicle crash. So that's administered by a medical professional, and there's some promising case study research. So not a randomized controlled trial. So where I focus on is as a registered dietitian, I follow Health Canada recommendations for omega-3s, and I can only recommend doses, so I can't prescribe anything. So in my in the literature that I've looked at, and I've also done so in Rugby research, so we looked at 2 grams of DHA per day over the course from a subconcussion protection and also post-injury. So 2 grams of DHA is about 3 to 5,000 milligrams of total omega-3s. And why DHA is key is because it's really prominent both in your cerebral cortex and your retina too. And so we see improvements in, so what the literature has shown with 2 grams of DHA is they've looked at blood biomarkers of brain injury and seen a less of an increase in those brain injury biomarkers compared to those who were with placebo. So they weren't taking that dose. So that is the dose that I recommend, both for individuals who are at high risk of repetitive subconcussion injuries and post-concussion. So the other thing with omega-3s, and you have to kind of look at the label as well to make sure you're getting that dose and how many pills you're getting, because it will say like total omega-3s and it will be like, okay, there's 1,500 milligrams, but then you look at the DHA and there's only like 460 milligrams, so now you have to take so many more pills. 2 of the brands that I love, and I don't get funded by them in any way, but Nutri-C and Aqua Omega are really good brands that are manageable from a financial standpoint, that are also easy to access at the grocery store or online, and they're both Canadian based. They both have an NPM number, they're fantastic. And so the other thing to be aware of with omega-3s is they are big, big pills. So I also am conscious of that human aspect of taking those pills. So if you're trying to get 2 grams of DHA, which is what I would recommend, but that might be, you need to take 6 of those giant pills a day. That's a lot. And so I'm just trying to get someone, okay, let's find, and I recommend those brands because they're also more concentrated, so you don't have to take as many to get that dose. And so usually it ends up being about 4 pills a day, but some brands it can be up to like 10. So because they have such low concentration of DHA, and it can be a fish-based or an algae-based product. So doing a plant-based option of omega-3s is perfectly fine. They're actually quite rich in DHA, and trying to aim for that 2 grams of DHA per day. I just see a question about dietary sources of DHA as well. So, salmon, mackerel, sardines are really rich sources of DHA. Typically, for salmon, whether it's farmed or fresh, usually around 8 ounces of, or like the kind of the size of your palm, is going to be around that 2 grams of DHA. So, again, from a food first perspective, getting more fish in your diet, especially from those fatty fish, is great. We sourcing that fish can be really challenging, especially if you're in Ontario. When I lived in BC, it was great. So there was just constant fish, and we know like fish stock is also not great these days. So
No, those are great, excellent points. And yeah, the availability always seems to come back to the question at hand, right? So when I know you mentioned this in the webinar, but because when it comes to like the nausea, when it comes to post-concussion syndrome feelings and stuff like that, obviously lack of appetite is kind of a key feature. So if someone's having a tough time trying to get adequate diet, like scheduling and stuff like that, and they can't seem to, um, I don't know what the right word is, but kind of or follow that. What would be some like first step recommendations for like allowing that to kind of roll into one or roll into itself?
yeah, it's a really great question. So with appetite changes, and I think there's this stress of like, I need to get enough energy. I need to get enough energy to heal my brain, and like so you're adding on this extra stress, and I can't get enough. And I think it's really important to strip away any of that like pressure and just meet you where you are right now. And so everyone's an individual, but typically when I have like athletes or individuals with low appetite, I just start with, okay, let's talk about some simple foods. Here's a list of really simple foods that are going to be easy on your stomach. And there's like, if you are eating a piece of dry toast every couple hours, great. Like you're getting something. If it's whole wheat, even better. If it's white or sourdough, whatever. Like you just do what you can do. If you're getting some saltine crackers, that's great. So let's just try to make sure the first goal is you're trying to eat something every couple hours. And I don't care, really what that is and how much that is. You might, I think it just adds too much pressure, and then we go from there. So as your appetite gets managed and improves, then we are going to add some more in slowly. The other thing that can work, because I'm also talking about hydration, and I talked about liquid meals, but God, a smoothie when you have like no energy and like no appetite, who wants to make a smoothie? Even a meal replacement drink, the smell might bother you, but things like popsicles or freezies can be really beneficial to have, especially in the heat. So you can get fruit-based popsicles that are a bit more, they're not like made for a 5-year-old, but they're a bit more whole food based. And something like that can be a really great thing that's going to hydrate you and provide you a little bit of energy for your brain too. So yeah, everyone's an individual, starting where you're at. And again, don't make it too complicated. Again, dry toast, crackers, gluten-free find your favorite cracker and just munch on that, and then slowly start to add some things on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one of the constant things that we've talked about in these past webinars is that whole energy game, right? So like just trying to get something better than nothing when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
But we're gonna ask one last question and then call it there. But when it comes to the um, where am I here? When it comes to like gut health and whatnot, are you able to revert your gut health back to what it is or what it was before, or is it going to be slightly different post-concussion? And if there's a bit of a follow-up to that, if we have time, like how long does that necessarily take? If I know that's a very nebulous question and like how we just talked about everyone's different, but are you able to like revert your gut health back to what it was before, or is it just something that you have to move on from and it changes over time?
That's a really tricky question. So, in a healthy, non injured individual, yes, you can really improve your gut. So, if you're eating kind of a very Western diet and then you start to, move more towards a Mediterranean diet, um, you can definitely revert your gut microbiome and improve your gut microbiome. Just the same as you can make it worse by following a pretty restrictive diet or a very highly Western diet. In an injured brain, I don't know. I don't know. It's really like it's going to depend on the severity of the injury, and honestly, there's just not the wealth of research that's looked at. Let's just look at gut microbiome changes and different severities of brain injury. So, from a mild traumatic brain injury to a traumatic brain injury to a subconcussive injury, we don't know kind of the severity or the actual correlation with how much of that microbiome is changing, what specific bacteria is being affected. I mean that that there's the rugby, sorry, not the rugby, the football study I put up. There's a pediatric study as well that didn't show much promise, and then how long is it going to take? So what's the percentage of disruption? So how much of that gut microbiome is going to become kind of this dysbiosis, and then how long is it going to take to recover? And it's so frustrating because it's also the same with every concussion injury, every individual, their recovery can look so different. And the length of time for that injury. So I wish I had a great answer and a nice little bow for you, but I don't. I don't know, and that's also why when I'm going back at 44 to school to do this, because I think there needs to be more research in this area, and I also think there needs to be more research in women in this area. So hopefully I may know more, but I think that's where we continue to push for research, in this area for concussions.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for your presentation and also taking the time to answer some of those questions. I know I learned a lot. I hope everyone did as well. Everyone, thank you for engaging in the Q&A as well. So before we close out today's webinar, I want to take a moment and share a few resources that we have available at CLFC to support you. So the helpline provides personalized support to those affected by brain injury. So if you or someone you know needs guidance on finding the right provider, managing lingering symptoms, or have any other questions, you can submit a request using the link in the chat, and a member of our team will be in touch. We also host weekly and monthly support groups for patients and caregivers navigating persistent post-concussion symptoms and suspected CTE. There will also be a link in the chat for that. And if you are a patient looking for one-on-one peer support, we do have a peer support connection program where you will be matched with a volunteer with lived experience. And if you're interested, please book a call using the link in the chat as well. You can stay connected with us on social media. So we've got those links in the chat as well. And finally, on behalf of Concussion Legacy Foundation Canada, thank you all for joining us this morning. And a huge thank you to Ashley for joining and sharing your knowledge with the community. Our next learning series will take place Friday, August 21st from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern. And if you want to be the first to learn about future events like this, sign up for our newsletter using the link in the chat. And you'll also receive a recording of today's session to the email that you registered with early next week. And the recording will be uploaded to YouTube later today. Thank you again for being here, and we hope that you all have a great day.